Let's get into Fixer's Sack this week. This is where you can ask your questions. Email in myxboxandmepodcast@gmail.com or hit us up in my Discord with the questions in the My Xbox and Me tab for questions. First one comes in from Luke Alderslayer and says, question for the podcast. If Halo Infinite comes out this year, / next year, and is overwhelmingly disappointed at launch, do you think Xbox and 343 should support it long term and hope they can turn it around? Or do you think Xbox should finally make the big call and give up with 343 and Halo? Maybe put in the series on hiatus or completely rebooting with a new studio. Maybe a Bethesda studio such as id Software. Crash, I'm going to go to you first because I think you're probably the biggest Halo fan out of the three of us here. What happens if Halo is underwhelming this year or next?
I think if Halo is underwhelming, I think chances are Microsoft puts it away for a while. I think Halo's in a really unfortunate position where its core fan base is very split on what they want from the game. So no matter what happens with Halo, I don't see it ever like being a blowout success simply because of its own audience. Because there's people in Halo who are like, well, I want that old school Halo feel. I don't want running. I want dual wielding. Why can't I play as Covenant and all these things? And there's people who like the newer games. And they are two distinct styles, right? Going from a Halo 1 to Halo 5 is a very different experience. And so I think it has that sort of difficulty going with it. I don't think I'd want to see Bethesda touch it, not even id Software. I like what id Software does. I just don't think that a Doom feels like Halo. I do think those are two different experiences. And whether you like it or not, 343's games do feel like an evolution of Halo. But I do think the game needs to sort of go away for a while if this isn't a super success, or not a super success, just successful.
This is the question.
So that they can sort of work on ideas.
The question I would love to change it then is like, what does it need to be considered successful to you? Like, for me, I'm like, all it needs to do is have that. If they have a battle royale, I know we always come back to battle royale with Halo, like, and it's free to play and it's actually good. Like, I'm not saying people are done with Call of Duty or Fortnite, but if they can eat away from that mind share and that market share, it could be humongous, like really big. And I kind of think this doesn't live or die on its single player. For me, like, I think people will play it single player and they will either love it or hate it. But if they can make that free-to-play multiplayer work across Xbox and PC, that could be the thing that drives Halo into the next level and gets the people like me or the casual audience. Obviously, we're not going to see Master Chief dancing unless you play it in Fortnite. Like, that's the only way you're going to see that. But to you, what does it need to do to be considered a success? Because I don't think even it getting 10s out of 10s on every outlet would even make it a success.
Yeah, I think for me, it just has to. Halo's always had a problem, at least with the 343 games, where if you look at 4, it's like the multiplayer is horrible. Some people don't like the campaign. The campaign's divided. Some people argue Halo 4 is an overall bad game. I think they need to come out with a mode where it's like the multiplayer is generally well received. And then the single player is generally well received. I don't think it needs to be a case where it blows you out of the water for either of them. I think a BR game, like you mentioned, would be fantastic for the game, but I don't think it even necessarily needs that. It's just what's there can't be looked at as a flawed product by a majority of the people.
Matt, what about you?
There's a lot, right? Like, I disagree. I don't think it can be okay, especially the single player. I think you know, for better or worse, the hype around this game at this point, the delays, the gameplay that's come out, the kind of new open world aspect to it, have made people think that this is going to be a kind of reboot akin to God of War in whatever year that was that we never get right.
I've got to stop you. You always say that, and I 100% disagree with you. You say that so much, and I think to myself, no, because we weren't expecting that. And even with what we've seen, it's not akin to a God of War reboot, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think the open world aspect of it could do that. It could be enough.
But the open world aspect also kind of goes back to Halo 1, which did have this sort of more open world Metroidvania type of aspect to it, where you're backtracking and you have this world to explore type of feel. It just seems
I
like this
feel
will
like-
be that on a bigger scale.
I feel like anything that gets rebooted nowadays just always gets compared to God of War because God of
Yeah.
War was so amazing. And I
Because
just
it
think
did it
it's
so well.
I think it's such a super unfair comparison to like hold it to that sort of level. I think Halo looks great. I think it looks really good. I loved what I saw of it, and it was like, oh, this actually looks interesting for someone who's not interested in Halo. But it doesn't
me too.
look the way God of War. I never played a God of War ever. I never played one. I thought those games looked garbo, in my opinion. Just didn't like it. When the new God of War came out, I was like, gee, I have to play this. This looks crazy. I don't think it's like that with Halo. I've played Halo. I've enjoyed Halo. I've just never understood the lore. I've never understood the world. Where this new one feels like, well, I'm going to get to understand the lore and the world, and maybe they'll make me care. And they'll add some new mechanics. The grappling hook looked dope, in my opinion. And again, people are very divided on that. But it's like, I don't know, just not to go on too much.
No.
I do think
totally agree with everything you're saying.
I do think that like we always with reboots, remakes and stuff, like God of War did it, yes, and they did it really well. But they're not the only person to ever reboot a game.
Yeah.
No, but I think
That's
they're an
very
example of the team doing it correctly and to huge success, right? Like you say, they're bringing in that new audience. And Halo is one of those things that every gamer knows of, but I don't think at this point every mainstream gamer has played or understands. Like you say, I think it's been so long since the last installment, and so many new people are in this ecosystem now with the Series X and S and Game Pass.
Yeah.
That they do have to understand that not everybody's going to have played Combat Evolved who's jumping into this Halo, and so they need to capture
Which I think
people,
they have.
right?
Which
And
I think they will. I do think that I think what you are saying, I think they will achieve with this game. That doesn't make it a good game.
and that's all I
though.
want. When I say that's
it
what I
doesn't
want,
make it a good
yeah.
game. Yeah.
okay, agreed. But I totally agree with what you were saying earlier, where you were saying you don't think this game lives or dies on the single player.
No.
Totally agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't think it does. I think it's all about the multiplayer, and I think a best case scenario for this game is in 2 years' time, we think of it in a similar way to Rainbow Six Siege or Overwatch.
Agreed.
Like, it's still there. It's probably not
living.
top 5 games being streamed on Twitch. It's probably not, but there's an esports scene around it. There is a hardcore fan base around it, and people are still playing it. Those servers are still populated. I think that's a best case scenario for Halo because it's a limited audience, right? It's not on mobile. Well, who knows with xCloud, right? But but my point is, it is locked off in an ecosystem, right? Nobody's playing on PlayStation, right?
Yeah.
And so like you've locked off a group of gamers there, and so it could only go so far. But I think that's kind of a best case scenario for it, and I think you're right. I think look, they're lining everything up to make sure that I think that can be as successful as possible with the free to play multiplayer and stuff like that. I think is going to be a huge deal, and I think going back to Luke's question, they have to double down on this. If it's disappointing at launch, people don't like it, there's no way in my mind that they abandon it after a year. Like, it has to be a Rainbow Six Siege. It has to be a,
They've proven that they won't just abandon it anyway. Look what happened with Master Chief Collection. Like, that come out horrendously.
Yeah.
Like, that game was in such bad shape. I bought that game day one, because again, I wanted to try and become a Halo fan, doing an Xbox podcast. It didn't work, I'm sorry. But they definitely will not abandon it. And Xbox,
No.
I don't think I can remember a once a game is out, can we name an Xbox game first party that they just abandoned? Like, even what's the game, the fighting game that we didn't like in the end?
Killer Instinct.
No. Oh, how dare you? Chris,
Whoa.
get him. Get him.
I feel hurt.
Bleeding Edge. Bleeding Edge is what I'm talking about. That
Bleeding
wasn't just
Edge.
abandoned. That game didn't just get abandoned. It had no player base. So they stopped making new content. But it didn't just get abandoned out the blue because it was a broken or not very good game. It didn't cater, it didn't cultivate an audience is the problem with that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think in Halo's defense also, Halo generally, even Halo 5 and Halo 4, tends to keep an audience for a certain amount of time. There's still people that play Master Chief Collection.
Yep.
And that's still been getting like new content recently.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I don't see them. I think it would be, even if the new Halo wasn't a super big success, I think it would be a dumb move on Microsoft to just abandon it and be like, yep, we're done. That is Halo. That is their franchise. That is the face of Xbox for a lot of people. When they think back on Halo, they think back to the old Xbox days when they were playing Halo 1 and Halo 2 and all those.
Let's move on.